Howdy folks, this is Tony here, and today we're going to talk about a new phenomenon called the Cope-servative, and that's a term I just made up. It's a conservative who tries to cope with election loss by soothing their wounds and saying, oh, better luck next time, or something to that effect. These kinds of people refuse to acknowledge any particular evidence of election fraud, and they like to think that all elections are free and fair so that they can sleep at night. Now, there are multiple ways you could become a Cope-servative, whether you're an establishment Washington type Republican where you don't really care about social issues or border security, you just want your occasional tax break here and there, or you're a young conservative and you do not know much about how evil some politicians can be. You're sort of naive and you just think that politicians are nice, honest people. They just win because they have a better message or something of that nature. If you are one of these people, you might fall victim to becoming a Cope-servative. So I have to get an important disclaimer before I get to the list out the way. That is, I am not accusing any particular individual of any particular crime. At the same time, I am not calling for innocent people to be physically attacked for any reason. Now that that is out of the way, let's look at the top 7 things that Cope-servatives like to say. Number 1. We'll get them next time. These are the types of Cope-servatives who, when Trump was ousted in the 2020 election, they said, we'll get him in the 2022 election. Did that happen? Nope. And these will be the same people who, after Democrats managed to keep both chambers of Congress, as well as keep most of their governor races, they're going to say, but we'll show them in 2024. They like to say, look at the polls. Look how unpopular Biden is. Look at that bad executive order he passed. That'll wake people up. We'll get him. And it never happens. They just say that so they can sleep at night because they do not want to face the possibility that the country as they know it is forever gone. Statement number 2 that Cope-servatives say, we only lost by X amount of votes. These are the type of people who will try to say, well, we only lost by 4,000 votes in that county. Well, have you looked at whether or not those were legitimate votes? Have you actually done canvassing? Have you actually gone around to determine it? Or do you just say, we just have to tweak this and we'll get them next time. We only lost the woman vote by this amount. We lost the young vote by this amount. They trust those. If you can't trust the polls, why should you trust the exit polls? Again, these are the people who try to look at charts so they can get to bed at night. But does that really ever change anything? I'm quite sure that there have been administrations that have offended a demographic that continued to vote for them. Or did they? Was it fraudulent? Statement number 3 that Cope-servatives say, all elections have some fraud, but it wasn't enough to change the outcome. Oh, really? Mitch McConnell actually said this during Trump's ouster in 2020. All elections have some fraud, but there wasn't enough to overcome the fact that Biden won. Now, first of all, if there's any fraud in that election and you don't stop that person and arrest them and throw their vote out, you need to hold the entire election over, because you've ever heard the term one bad apple spoils the whole bunch? If you can't trust some of the election, why should you trust any of it? Because think about it. Let's say we have a state that has 1 million people in it. If out of 1 million people, 10% of those votes are fraudulent, what stops 11% from being fraudulent next year? And then 12% from being fraudulent in the next election? And over time, like the frog in the hot water, eventually you'll get a significant enough chunk of that election to be fraudulent to determine the outcome. So that is just a total surrender defeatist mentality to take. Statement number 4 that Cope-servatives say is, we were too extreme. If only Roe v. Wade didn't get overturned until after the election, we could have won the woman vote. We were too extreme. We need to stop talking about MAGA, stop talking about closing the border, stop talking about school choice, stop talking about social issues, stop talking about protecting kids from being mutilated by the surgeon. We need to just talk about taxes and the gas pump. And if we stay away from socialism issues and just talk about the gas pump and your wallet, then we'll win people over. Oh, really? So if that's the case, we should expect that liberal Democrats win, right? How did that work out for Lee Zeldin? How did that work out for Dr. Oz against Fetterman? Dr. Oz is pretty liberal. He's a liberal that put on a conservative hat, and Sean Hannity endorsed him, and that's the only reason he ended up on the ballot. Sean Hannity, Trump, and himself did a weird experiment, but he was a fairly liberal conservative, and he still lost. So if you truly think that all you have to do is shift your stance and you'll be okay, How did that work out for liberal conservatives this go around? Anyway, statement number 5 that Cope-servatives like to say: it was Trump's fault. Really? First of all, Trump wasn't on the ballot this time. And second of all, if you tried to make it Trump's fault, then the problem that you're having with that is that the people that were endorsed, not by Trump, but by the establishment Republicans, they couldn't even stay on the ballot during the primaries. Not only that, but establishment Republicans are not in power in Washington either. Mitch McConnell can't do squat. And even so, the establishment Republican, the one that you're more used to from like the 90s and early 2000s, they're voting in favor of gun control. They're voting in favor of massive government spending. These guys are liberals at this point. They don't even count as conservatives. So if you take the Trump type conservatives out of the party, all you have left are liberals that wear an R next to their name, like Murkowski and Romney, and especially people like Liz Cheney. So that's why Trump is not even that relevant. This midterm election was not a referendum on Trump. Anyway, the sixth thing that Cope-servatives love to say is, we need enough good votes to overcome the fraudulent ones. That is one of the dumbest things that you could possibly say. And the reason is because if you think about it, all the people that count the elections have to do, if there were fraud, again, I'm being hypothetical, so YouTube doesn't censor me. If that happens, all they have to do is delay the vote until they count all the legitimate votes. Then now they know how many they need, because you'll say, don't do early voting, flood election day. So they don't know how many they need to overcome the Republican vote. Really? Then all they have to do is delay the count until they figure out how many they need to overcome the Republican vote and then throw those in. So that is literally one of the most helpless arguments you could possibly make. And finally, the last one is, it's in the past, let's focus on the next election. People in 2020 said, well, Trump is in the past, let's focus on the midterms. How well did that work out? And these will be the same people who say, well, the midterms are in the past, let's focus on 2024. Now, in theory, we're being theoretical here because, again, I don't want to be censored, so we're going to say we're theoretical. If you couldn't stop the election from being stolen in 2020, again, theoretically, and if theoretically you couldn't stop it from being stolen in 2022, what in the ham sandwich is going to make you think you're going to be able to stop it from being stolen in 2024? You're going to have DeSantis go up against Biden and get crushed. Because who's counting the ballots? Again, theoretically, hypothetically. So all of that to say, the Cope-servative does not want to wake up to the possibility that the First Amendment no longer applies. Because if you think about it, voting is the ultimate expression of the First Amendment. It's you in writing telling your government how it should run itself and who should be in charge. That's why people vote on referendums. That's why people vote on candidates. And if that doesn't matter, your government's going to install whoever they want in charge, then the only possibility at that time is either a national divorce, conservative states form their own country, form their own union, liberal states form their own union, or the much more bloody possibility that will end up with people possibly being unalived because they're tired of, because people are tired of them oppressing them and nullifying their vote. And again, we don't want people to have to lose their life unnecessarily. We want things to be as peaceful as possible. So you Cope-servatives, you might need to wake up. You might need to rethink things. Anyway, let me know how in the comments below how many of these arguments you have heard from the nearest Cope-servative near you. I want to know what you think. Have a good day, everybody.